Now, for this week, we have Biosafety and Biorisk. So, pagdating sa biosafety, importante dyan ng proper way of wearing your PPE or what you call the donning. Kapag donning, sinusuot mo yung PPE. So, ano ba yung proper order of donning the PPE? So, first you have the gown, followed by the mask, the goggles, and the gloves. Yung gloves yung pinakahuli mong sinusuot. So, another thing is, after putting on the PPE, of course, you have to remove the PPE, di ba? So, ano ba yung proper way of removing the PPE? So, kapag removing the PPE, the first thing you're going to remove is actually your gloves. Gloves dapat. Followed by the goggles, the gown, and the mask. So, that is a proper order of doffing the PPE. So, bakit kaya importante ang doffing? Ang doffing kasi pagdating sa biosafety, this is of importance para nga naman hindi ka magkaroon ng infection. Para hindi ka mahawa kung ano man yung sakit na mayroon. Kasi nga naman, tandaan nyo, yung gloves, that is the dirtiest part of your PPE. So, kailangan mo nang alisin yung gloves. Then, kapag nawala na yung gloves, wala na yung pinaka-source of infection, then, pwede mo nang tanggalin yung goggles mo, followed by the gown, and then last yung mask. Bakit last yung mask? Kasi nga naman, just in case may mga natira pang microorganisms sa lab gown mo, then, hindi mo siya masisinghot pag nagliparan yung mga yan when you remove your PPE. Now, what is biorisk assessment? So, when you say biorisk assessment, this is a process. Process ito in order for you to identify what are the different risks in the laboratory and how are you going to manage those risks. Okay? So, first, under the biorisk assessment is to determine the following. Una-una, who is the susceptible host? So, sa ating work, the host, which is us, tayo, yung mga healthcare worker, we are the susceptible host. Another thing is, what is the infectious agent and ano yung kanilang route of transmission to the susceptible host. So, for example, you are going to work in a TB lab, a lab that handles Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So, definitely, the infectious agent is Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and you will know that you can get that through airborne transmission. Okay? And then another thing is the concentration of the agent. It must be high enough to cause a disease. So, if you are always exposed to that microorganism and then the lab is not practicing biosafety procedure properly, then definitely mataas ang concentration. So, mas mataas din ang chance na magkaroon ka ng sakit. Now, ano ba yung two major sources of biological hazards in the lab? Saan mo makukuha yung mga biohazard na yan? Unang-una sa specimen mismo. So, kunyari, yung sputum ng pasyente, yung urine ng pasyente, o dyan magagaling talaga yung microorganism. And then after that is the cultured microorganism or the grown culture. When you say grown culture, ibig sabihin yan, pinrocess mo na, nagprocess ka na ng specimen, pinatubo mo na siya sa culture media, kaya yung mga bacteria tumubo na. It is actually part of our job. Tayo yung nagpapatubo ng mga bacteria. 'Di ba? So, kapag ikaw, iniisip mo na meron kang UTI, magpapagawa ka ng test known as urine culture. Okay? And then, do sa urine culture na yun, titinan doon kung ano ba yung bacteria na meron ka. Para makita mo kung ano yung bacteria na meron, dapat pinapatubo mo yung bacteria, pinaparami mo siya sa laboratory. So, yung mga growing cultures in the lab, plus yung specimen ng pasyente, ito yung major source of biological hazards in the laboratory. That's why we must always handle this properly. Ano naman yung lye? When you say lye, those are laboratory-acquired infections. Okay? So, paano mo pwedeng makuha? Ano yung mga ways para makuha mo infection? Una-una, pwedeng parenteral. So, when you are extracting a blood sample, pagka-extract mo ng dugo, yung needle, natusok ka. So, that is an example of a needle stick or contaminated sharp injury. Another thing is spills and splashes in the skin or mucous membrane, of course, kapag natalsikan ka ng infectious material. And then, ingestion. Oh, by the way, sa spill kasi, for example, may natapon ka na solution sa laboratory na mayroong mga microbes. So, delikado siya kasi kapag natapon yan, lumilipad yung mga microorganism. You're actually creating aerosols. So, yung mga aerosols na yon, kapag hindi ka nakamask and then nasinghot mo siya, then pwede ka magkaroon ng infection. Okay? Also, in the ingestion, definitely, kapag kinain mo or meron kang nilagay sa bibig mo, that's why, whenever you are in the laboratory, strictly, you should not put anything in your mouth. So, no eating in the laboratory. Okay? So, example of that is putting pens or fingers in the mouths and also mouth pipetting. And then last is the inhalation of infectious aerosols. So, if you are working in the lab and then wala kang mask, definitely you're going to inhale kung ano ba yung mga infectious particles na meron sa specimen. That is what you call the infectious aerosols. So, ano ba yung mga recommendations ng CDC to make sure that the lab will actually be safe from all of this biological risk? So, una-una is that all of the lab and laboratories and students should know that the bacteria handled in the lab can make people sick. So, definitely, if you're going to work in a laboratory that has microbiology, dapat knowledgeable ka kung ano ba yung mga bacteria na yon. Kaya nga part ng course natin is microbiology. Pagdating nyo ng second year, aaralin nyo yan, yung mga different types of microbes, different types of bacteria, and then aalamin mo yung mga bacteria na yun, ano ba ang kanilang mga characteristics. Okay? So, importante na alam mo kung sino yung kalaban mo. Kasi kalaban mo yung mga yan mga microorganism, kalaban natin yan. Siyempre, dapat kung may kalaban tayo, inaaral natin kung ano ba yung kanilang mga characteristics, ano ba yung kanilang mga weakness, how are you going to get infection from the bacteria, and how are you going to control the bacteria. Okay? Another thing is that the student should have dedicated writing utensils and supplies in the workstation. So, yung mga ballpen sa lab, hindi yan inuuwi. Iniiwan lang yan. Bakit? Kasi, they're actually a source of fomites. Yung mga fomite na yan, kapag fomite, it means that those are inanimate objects. So, yung mga object na walang buhay, mga lifeless objects, that can actually get the microorganism. Ito yung mga kinakapitan ng bacteria. Tulad niyan, ballpen, lifeless yan. Pero, pwedeng kapitan yan ng mga bacteria. Kaya, pag inuwi mo yan, possible na mauwi mo yung bacteria. Okay? So, laboratories and students must be aware of the organism in which they are working and what is the sign and symptoms if they get infected with one of the organism. Definitely, dapat alam mo yung mga possible na signs and symptoms. Ito yung magiging way mo para malaman kung ikaw ba ay na-infect or hindi. And then, of course, laboratories and students must be trained and proficient in biosafety practices and techniques. So, yung mga training na yan, tsaka proficiency, unang-una, ginagawa yan sa school, di ba? Kapag nag-aaral ka. Tapos, kapag license ka na, may mga additional training pa na requirement sa mga RMT bago ka mag-work sa mga specialized labs such as the microbio or the TB lab or even virology lab. Hindi basta-basta pumapasok sa virology lab na wala kang alam. Another thing is, the lab coat should always be worn over PPE, diba? So, of course, dapat lagi ka may PPE. And then, individuals should not leave the laboratory with PPE. So, no walking around the hallway with PPE. So, dito pa lang sa school natin, bawal na naglalakad ka na naka-PPE ka. So, when you leave the lab, do sa school, sa laboratory natin, mayroon doon mga sabitan ng lab gown. Mayroon doong rack. Okay, so dapat alisin mo muna yung mga lab gown mo and then please remove your gloves when you exit the laboratory. So, ganun din. Sa school pa lang, binibigyan na kayo ng discipline. Kasi pagdating nyo sa trabaho, ganun pa rin ang rules. When you leave the room, kung saan ka nagtatrabaho, doon lang yung lab gown. Doon lang yung mga gloves, doon lang yung mask. Hindi siya nilalabas sa hallway. Okay? So, PPE always should be disposed of properly. So, hand washing things and supplies must be provided. Laboratorians and students should always wash their hands before leaving the laboratory. So, pagdating natin sa face-to-face classes, meron tayong mga exercises doon regarding sa proper hand washing. So, paano ba yung proper hand washing technique kapag ikaw ay isang medtech? Lahat yan aralin nyo sa MLSP 2. Now, ang Biorisk assessment, it is actually a process. Sabi ko nga kanina, process yan in order for you to know ano ba yung mga ginagawa nyong actions sa laboratory para magkaroon ka ng infection. Diba? Ano ba yung mga actions and practices na ginagawa sa lab that can actually put you at risk of having the infection. Kaya nga tinawag siyang biological risk assessment. Inaalam mo, ano ba yung mga possible na mangyari sa lab na pwedeng ma-infect yung mga health workers. So, unang-una muna, you must recognize what are the different lab practices that can result in infectious exposure. So, ano yung mga ginagawa sa lab? Ano yung SOP natin? Another thing is that, what is the likelihood that a lie will occur? So, ano ba yung chance na pwede kang magkaroon ng sakit? Diba? Definitely, kapag mataas ang concentration ng infectious microorganism, And then, if you are not following the safety procedure, definitely makakasakit ka. And what is the consequence of that infection? So, ito yung tatlong importante na process under the Biorisk assessment. What is the lab practices that can result in the infectious exposure? What are the likelihood that a lie will occur? And what is the consequences of that infection? Okay? So, sabi dito, Biorisk assessment, this is a process. Process used to recognize the hazardous characteristic of an infectious agent that may be encountered in the clinical microbiology laboratory. So, under ng Biorisk assessment is the grouping of the infectious microorganism. So, you have different risk groups. Risk group 1, ibig sabihin niyan, walang problema sa microorganism. The microorganism is there, but it is very unlikely to cause any disease at all. Okay? So, yung mga microorganisms na ito yung mga microorganisms that are part of the environment. Yung tinatawag natin na normal flora. Okay? Kaya nga naman, hindi siya pwede mag-cause ng sakit. Going to risk group 2. When you say risk group 2, it means that, yes, pwede ka na magkaroon ng sakit. Okay? It can cause human or animal disease. But it is unlikely to be a serious hazard to lab workers. So, ibig sabihin yan, yes, pwede magkaroon ng sakit, pero it is very unlikely pa rin na magkasakit ka. So, definitely, makakasakit ka lang dyan if you are not following the safety procedure. Yun ang difference na risk group 2. Okay? Again, they can cause human or animal diseases but is unlikely to be a serious hazard in the lab workers, the community, livestock, or the environment. Okay? Lab exposure may cause serious infection but effective treatment and preventive measures are available and the risk of spread of infection is limited. So, yes, infectious yung microorganism, pwede ka magkaroon ng sakit, but the chances of having a infection because of that is actually very low. Magkakasakit ka lang na, sa risk group 2 if you are not following the safety procedure in the laboratory. Okay, so avoidable siya. Yung risk group 3 naman, risk group 4, so ito yung talagang nagkukos ng sakit. But yes, makakasakit ka talaga. Anong kanilang difference? Yung risk group 3, may available na gamot and preventive measures. Yung risk group 4, wala. So, going to risk group 3 muna, so it means you're going to get the infection. However, the chances of spreading the infection to another is actually very low. So, hindi ka nakakahawa. Ikaw lang yung makakasakit. Kapag nagkasakit ka, ikaw lang. So, makakahawa ka ba? Unlikely. 'Di ba? It is very unlikely to spread it to another individual. However, yung risk group 4, yes, makakasakit ka and then makakahawa ka pa. So, you can actually transmit it directly to other people. And then, walang available na treatment for this. So, ano ba yung example ng risk group 4 natin? Tulad ngayon, di ba, meron tayong pandemic na coronavirus, right? So, yung coronavirus na yan, pwede ka makahawa. And then, wala pang available na vaccine or treatment against that. So, yun ang difference ni risk group 3 and 4. So, risk group 3, makakasakit ka, pero hindi ka nakakahawa. And then, merong gamot na available. Risk group 4, makakasakit ka, makakasakit yung iba, tapos, makakahawa ka, and then, walang available na treatment. Sa risk group 1, hindi siya nakukos ng sakit. Risk group 2, yes, it can cause disease or infection, pwede ka magkaroon ng sakit. However, the chances of having this infection is very low. Okay? And then, of course, there is a treatment available for this one. And you cannot spread it in the community. Hindi siya nakakahawa. So, ano ba yung examples ng mga microorganism na yan? Sa risk group 1, you have the Bacillus subtilis, non-pathogenic E. coli. Yung mga non-pathogenic E. coli na yan, as we all know, E. coli is part of our flora, di ba? So, kapag dumumi ka, may E. coli talaga. Kaya nga naman, hindi talaga infectious ang E. coli. So, risk group 2, example of that is the Chlamydia, Hepa A, Hepa B, and C, influenza, salmonella, mumps, and measles, di ba? Sabi ko nga kanina yung risk group 2, magkakasakit ka, pero sa'yo lang. And then, very unlikely yung chance na magkaroon ka ng sakit because of that. Example dyan yung hepatitis. Yan, mga hepatitis. Yung Hepa B, and Hepa C, you can actually get that through parenteral. So, kapag na-prick ka, dun ka lang pwede magkaroon ng sakit. Okay? So, kaya nga sabi ko kanina, unlikely na magkaroon ka ng sakit kasi meron ka mga safety procedure na ginagawa, di ba? In order for you to avoid those infection. So, para hindi ka ma-prick, tinuturuan ka kung paano ba yung proper way of handling sharps. Paano ba ang proper way of extracting blood, 'di ba? So, if you do not follow the procedure, definitely magkakasakit ka. Okay? So, sabi dito, moderate potential hazard to person and the environment includes bacteria, viruses that cause only mild disease to humans and are difficult to contract via aerosol in the lab setting. So, usually, ito yung mga makukuha mo through ingestion kapag kinain mo, 'di ba? Or direct contact ka talaga. And parenteral spread. Now, for the risk group 3 naman, so example of that, ito yung mga it can cause serious infection. Example of that is the H1N1, flu, Yersinia pestis, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, SARS, rabies, etc. And for the risk group 4 naman, example of that is the Ebola and the smallpox. Ito yung mga wala pang gamot. Okay, so ang difference ng risk group 3, meron kang available na gamot for that or preventive measures. However, for the risk group 4, wala kang mga available na preventive measures and also treatment for that. Okay? Now, relation to the risk group to biosafety levels and practice and equipment. So, you must also relate, after identifying the different risk group, you must also identify what are the different biosafety level that I'm going to practice for this. So, kapag risk group 1, it requires biosafety level 1. So, example of that is the basic teaching research laboratory na meron tayo sa ating school. So, yung school natin, biosafety level 1 lang yon. And then, ano bang ginagawa na laboratory practices natin? Basic lang, 'di ba? Good management lang. And then, of course, sa safety equipment, wala naman masyadong kailangan, kundi yung open bench lang and also the workbench. Tulad ng lab natin sa school. Okay? Now, for the biosafety level 2 naman, ito yung mga meron tayo sa mga primary health services and diagnostic service and research center. Biosafety level 3, this is for the special diagnostic services and research. And for the biosafety level 4, this is for the dangerous pathogen unit. Ito na yung mga, ito yung nasa, nasa reference lab, which is the RITM. Okay? So, the level 3 plus airlock entry, shower exit, special waste disposal, ito mga kailangan nyo. And for the safety equipment, you need class 3 biosafety cabinet or positive pressure suit and filtered air. So, pati mismo yung air na meron tayo sa isang lab, it is also being filtered pagdating sa dangerous pathogen units. Okay? So, ito yung mga specialized lab natin. So, another thing is that, what is the likelihood of the hazard happening? So, you must also be able to classify ano ba yung mga possible na risk. Kaya nga, di ba sabi ko kanina, meron tayong mga low risk, moderate risk, high risk. So, paano mo nalalaman yon? Na meron kang low, moderate, high, and unacceptable risk. Okay? So, first, is the damage insignificant? Are you going to have insignificant damage to property, equipment, or minor injury? Okay? So, alin ba dito? Is it certain, probably occur, possible occur, remote possibility, or extremely unlikely? Diba? So, for example, meron kang isang hazard dito. Kunyari, this hazard is about getting infection from Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Diba? So, ano ba yung likelihood na makakaroon ka ng damage to property by being exposed to that? So, for example, ang likelihood mo is 5. Diba? Lalagyan mo ito 5. Okay? So, ito example lang to on how they are grading the risk. Ngayon, for example, sa pangalawa, classification, non-reportable injury, minor loss of process, or slight damage to property. So, ano ba yung chance na pwede magkaroon ng injury yung lab worker, pero hindi naman kailangan ng gamutin, di ba? Mga minor lang, mga non-reportable injury. So, kapag sinabi mo na almost certain, then that is 5 times 2, kaya naging 10. Okay? And then, will probably occur, that is 4. Since nasa classification siya ng 2 times 2, you will grade that as 8. Ganun ginagawa ang ating likelihood assessment. So, another thing, kapag dating sa level 3, what are the reportable injury, moderate loss of process, or limited damage to property? So, if you're almost certain, then that is 5 times 3. So, you have 15. If it is probably occur, that is 4 times 3, so you have 12. Another thing is major injury. Meron ba magkaroon ka ba na major injury, single fatality, critical loss of the process of damage? Kapag single fatality, ibig sabihin nun possible na merong mamatay, di ba? Yung health worker. So if the answer is almost certain, then you will grade that as 20. Now, multiple fatalities naman. Loss of business. So possible na magkaroon ka ng aksidente dyan na maraming health worker ang mamatay. Then, kung certain ka, the risk is 25. Okay, so that is 5 times 5. So, ito yung ginagawa natin na process on how are you going to grade what is the likelihood of the hazard to happen. So, part pa rin to na risk assessment. So, kapag yung isang hazard, you're able to grade that as 25, delikado yun. Kasi possible na yung facility na pinagtatrabahuhan mo, very risky, high risk sa buhay. So, possible na mamatay ka. 'Di ba? Kasi meron ka multiple fatalities dyan right? So, usually, iniiwasan natin to. Iniiwasan natin na mangyari yung mga ganong klaseng occurrence. Okay? So, basta tandaan nyo lang kapag biorisk assessment, definitely, kailangan i-classify mo yung mga risk, and then you must also know what are the different biosafety practices for that. Para maiwasan natin ito, yung mga catastrophe. Okay? So, also part din ng biorisk kasi, kailangan mo ring harapin to, what is the likelihood of the hazard to happen. So, na-identify mo na ano ba yung hazard na possible na mangyari. And then after that, after mo ma-identify, ano ba yung hazard, ano ba yung likelihood na mangyayari ito. Gaano ka ba ka-certain na mangyayari siya. So, kapag almost certain ka, ano ba yung mga possible na scenario. Tulad niyan, is significant ba yung damage to property? That is one scenario. Meron ka bang injury na minor? That is also another scenario. Meron ka bang moderate injury? Do you have a major injury? Or do you have multiple fatalities? Those are different scenario na pwedeng mangyari. And then dapat, you must be able to classify that and grade that. Para alam mo, kunyari ito, very, yung number 25 na yan, very high risk yan. So, it means lahat ng mga practices na pwedeng mag-lead sa number 25, hindi mo dapat gawin. 'Di ba? Right? Kasi nga multiple fatalities yan Definitely, dapat lagi kang merong fire extinguisher. Yung mga machine mo, dapat lagi siyang well-maintained, 'di ba? Para hindi magkaroon ng sunog. Okay? And then dapat yung mga staff mo nang tatrabaho, well-trained sila. Kasi kapag walang training ang mga staff na yan, magkakalat-kalat nga ang mga risk dyan. So, it is very fatal. Pwede siya mag-cause ng multiple fatalities. So, for example, yun nga, nag-handle kayo ng infectious microorganism sa lab, 'di ba? Kunyari, yung coronavirus natin ngayon, 'di ba? Tapos, yung mga medtech sa lab, wala silang training for the handling of coronavirus na yan, yung COVID na yan. Since wala silang training, di nila alam kung paano, possible na yung mga lab workers doon na nag-handle ng coronavirus na yan, possible na magkaroon sila ng sakit. And we all know that COVID can cause fatality. Pwedeng mamatay dahil sa COVID. That is an example of a multiple fatality. Or pwede rin magkasunog, 'di ba? Kapag yung mga makina sa lab hindi well maintained, yung may-ari ng lab nagtitipid, yung mga makina niya hindi niya pinapa-check, 'di ba? So possible na magkaroon ng sunog, multiple fatality 'yan. Okay? So, yung mga scenario na possible na magkaroon sa number 25, iniiwasan yan. Kaya nga naman, when you are handling a infectious microorganism, knowledgeable ka dapat. And then, when you are an operator of a lab, hindi ka basta-basta kasi makapag-operate talaga ng lab. Dapat knowledgeable ka and dapat sumusunod ka sa mga safety practices ng laboratory to avoid this one. So, what are the 5 steps that have been outlined in the CDC guideline for safe work practices in human and animal medical diagnostic lab for performing risk assessment? So, una muna, identify the hazard associated with the infectious agent or material. Second is, identify the different activities that might cause exposure to the agent or material. So, in-explain ko na to kanina, di ba? Identify the hazard, and identify the activities or the process. What are the competencies of the lab personnel? Dapat properly trained and experienced. Evaluate and prioritize the risk. So, ano ba yung mga likelihood of exposure? And what are the different what are you going to do to develop, implement, and evaluate the controls to minimize the risk of exposure? So, yung number 5 na yan, ano yung mga ginagawa mo na procedure para mawala or minimize yung risk of exposure. So, ito yung mga safety practices natin. So, ano ba yung mga different biosafety level? You have biosafety level 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, kapag biosafety level 1 lang, you are working with infectious agents that have known characteristics. Okay? So, this is suitable for work involving well-characterized agents not known to cause human disease in healthy adults. So, ito yung mga non-pathogenic agent naman. So, walang problema kapag non-pathogenic. Biosafety level 1 lang yan. Biosafety level 2 naman, it means that you are working with agents that can cause potential hazard to personnel in the environment. So, tandaan nyo lang kapag biosafety level 1, ang microorganism dito are those under the risk group 1. Kapag biosafety level 2, those are under the risk group 2 microorganism. For the biosafety level 3 naman, yes, infectious agent yan, under the risk group 3. They may cause serious or potential lethal disease as a result to exposure by the inhalation route. So, yung mga microorganism that you can get through inhalation, under siya ng biosafety level 3. For the biosafety level 4 naman, so these are the microorganism under the risk group 4. The work involves exotic infectious agent that can pose a high risk or life-threatening diseases. Kasi nga naman, walang treatment available for that. Di ba nga sabi ko kanina, kapag risk group 4, walang gamot. Walang vaccine, walang gamot. Kaya nga naman, dapat biosafety level 4 din ang gagawin mo. So, ano ba yung mga different biosafety level na yan? So, kapag level 1 naman, again, sabi ko nga kanina, these agents pose a minimal threat to lab personnel. So, pwede mo siyang gawin sa open bench top. So, yung mga process na ginagawa kapag biosafety level 1, pwede kang mag-work dun lang sa table. So, ang meron tayo sa school is biosafety level 1. Pero meron din tayong kasing biosafety cabinet. Kaya pwede rin tayo mag-handle ng biosafety level 2 microorganism. Okay? So, for the biosafety level 2 microorganism, those are infectious agents that require the BSL-2 containment and practices are agents that pose a moderate or potential hazard to the employee and the environment. So, if you're going to handle this microorganism, dapat meron kang protection muna. So, usually, meron kang vaccination. So, yung mga healthcare worker, meron tayong Hep B vaccination and tuberculosis skin test na ginagawa. And then, of course, you have a manual, a biosafety manual that is developed and updated. So, dapat meron kang procedure or talagang standard processing method sa mga specimen. Kaya nga meron ka tinatawag na biosafety manual dyan. And of course, you have the biosafety cabinet, which is the class 2. Ang meron tayo sa school is the class 2 biosafety cabinet. So, pwede tayo mag-handle ng biosafety level 2 microorganism. And also, the use of needle and syringes is restricted within the lab to only times when there is no alternative equipment to be used. So, bawal ang mga needle, syringes sa biosafety level 2. Hindi siya usually ginagamit. So, this is a BSL facility. Ito yung difference ng biosafety level 1 and also biosafety level 2. So, makikita mo, sa biosafety level 2, meron ka lang biosafety cabinet. Sa biosafety level 1, ang meron ka lang is the fume hood. Fume hood lang yan, class. Okay? Yung parang box dyan sa gilid niya na malaki. That is only the fume hood. Pero yung sa biosafety level 2, meron ka ng biosafety cabinet. Yun na kanyang difference. Okay? Yan. So, that is the biosafety level 2 facility. Meron kang biosafety cabinet, meron kang signages, and of course, you have the proper waste disposal. For the biosafety level 3 naman, again, the infectious agent are indigenous or exotic. So, pwede mo siya makuha through aerosol. Okay? And they are very lethal ang mga sakit na pwede mo makuha sa biosafety level 3. So, kapag biosafety level 3 na laboratory, dapat separate siya from other parts of the building and can be accessed through two self-closing door. An anteroom may be used for access. When you say anteroom, ito yung hindi ka basta papasok sa laboratory. Kumbaga, bago ka makapasok sa lab, meron pang isang room na papasukan ka. That is what you call the anteroom. Okay? And then after nung anteroom, dun na yung laboratory. So, dapat medyo malayo siya sa other parts of the building kapag biosafety level 3. Kung pwede, may sarili siyang building, okay lang. And then, for the biosafety level 3 naman, kailangan mo ng ducted air ventilation system. Ibig sabihin niyan, yung airflow sa lab, controlled mo. Kumbaga, yung papasok na air sa lab, and then yung lalabas na air sa lab should be clean. Okay? So, mayroong mga HEPA filter yan. So, the ceiling and floor must be solid and any seams must be sealed. Kasi nga, hindi pwede na may lumilipad dyan na air, di ba? Dapat nga, controlled ang airflow. On all parts of the lab must be constructed for easy cleaning and contamination. So, ano example of that? This one. Okay, so meron kang anteroom, nakikita mo, yung pintuan dyan, na parang may kwarto pa sa labas, that is the anteroom. Hindi ka basta-basta makakapasok sa lab. So, meron mo ng isang room, bago ka makapasok sa mismong lab room. Ito yung kanyang lab room na. 'Di ba? And then sa labas niya may anteroom, tas may pintuan pa sa labas. Okay? That is an example of a level 3 lab. And then yung kanyang air diyan sa loob, controlled yan. May kita mo may mga ventilation system. And then yung lumalabas na hangin, tsaka pumapasok na hangin is actually clean. Merong mga HEPA filter diyan for the air. Okay, this is an example of a working in a laboratory. May kita mo, meron siya mga biosafety cabinet and then nakasuit pa yung mga tao. Hindi yan basa-basa lang na gloves and mask and lab gown, di ba? Hindi yan normal na PPE. Okay, you have there the suit na ginagamit natin. The positive displacement suit. For the biosafety level 4, so the agents are very dangerous and exotic. So usually, dapat malayo siya. Separate building siya. May sarili siyang isolation facility. So, hindi siya pwede na sa isang building. Dapat meron siyang separate building. Ganun siya ka-threatening ang kanyang biosafety level. There are two types of biosafety level for lab. The cabinet and suit ang ginagamit natin. So, in the cabinet laboratory, all work is being performed in a class 3 biosafety cabinet. So, kanina, kapag biosafety level, okay, kapag biosafety level 2, gumagamit ka na ng class 2 biosafety cabinet. Okay? However, pagdating mo sa biosafety level 3, gagamit ka na ng class 3. Doon din sa biosafety level 4. So, class 3 biosafety cabinet ang ginagamit dyan. And then, a suit, laboratory, personnel, wear a positive pressure protective suit to perform all work. So, ito yung mga positive pressure protective suit. So, as you can see, meron siyang respirator na nakakabit sa kanya. So, yung air sa loob niya, controlled. Diba? Nakakahinga siya. So, again, for the level 4, the facility either is located in a separate building, in an isolation facility. And then, access is strictly controlled in the area. Hindi basta-basta makakapasok dyan. So, ito yung mga microorganisms na life-threatening, can be transmitted by aerosol, or have unknown risk of transmission. So, yung mga exotic and dangerous na hindi mo pa naaaral na microorganism. So, kapag bago yung microorganism, pasok mo na siya sa biosafety level 4 para pag-aralan siya. Okay? So, ito yung example of a biosafety level 4. Yan. So, makikita mo, yung mga tao, may mga nakakonect na blue sa kanila. Ito yung kanilang mga source of oxygen. Okay? So, positive pressure suit yan. Okay? Yan ang example of a level 4 containment. So, in the Philippines, anong meron tayo? Hindi ko lang sure kung okay na yung level 4 sa RITM, pero ginagawa siya. Ang meron tayo is up to level 3. Yun ang meron tayo. Ang meron na level 4 na pinakamalapit sa Philippines is nasa Singapore. And you also have China, of course, and Japan, yung mga yon. But in the Philippines, ang meron tayo na gawa na yung level 3. I'm not sure kung gawa na yung level 4. Pero dinidevelop pa rin yung level 4. So, personnel entering and exiting the laboratory through the clothing range room, clothing change room. So, hindi ka basta-basta makakapasok sa lab. Kailangan mo muna, meron kang anti-room na doon ka muna nagbibihes. You have air clothing change room. And then, when the personnel leave the lab, they must completely change the clothes and shower. So, hindi ka pwedeng umuwi nang hindi naligo. Kaya nga, kasi level 4 lab ito eh. So, dapat mag-shower ka. The clothes are then decontaminated before being laundered. So, pati yung damit mo na sinuot, it should be autoclave. Autoclave muna bago mo siya laban. And then, the Biosafety Level 4 lab has a dedicated non-recirculating ventilation system. Sabi ko nga kanina, yung kanilang room, meron silang HEPA filter. So, yung HEPA filter na yan, yung mga air na lalabas sa room, it is also being filtered. Yung air na papasok, it is also being filtered. So, very clean air ang meron tayo sa loob and labas ng laboratory. So, all material is decontaminated before leaving the Biosafety Level 4 laboratory. Pati yung damit, it should be autoclave before being laundered. So, ito yung biosafety level lab natin na 4. Another example of that is this one. Okay? So, ganyan siya. Makikita mo, may mga nakakabit sa kanila na kulay orange. Ito yung kanilang source of oxygen. So, these are the different biosafety cabinet. So, for letter A, yan, that is the class 1. And then you have the class 2 and of course, the class 3. Okay? So, pag biosafety cabinet, again, the air is being circulated within the hood only. So, ito yung meron tayo sa lab, the biological safety cabinet. So, the class 2 biosafety cabinet hood is the most common in the microbiome laboratory. So, ito yung meron tayo sa lab natin sa school. So, kung mapansin nyo, meron siyang glass na inaangat. So, hindi siya pwedeng iangat all the way. So, yung hangin na papasok sa kanya, dito na pupunta, dito sa part na inangat na glass. So, dyan yung hangin. Pag pumasok yung hangin na yan, ang flow niya is pababa, tapos, it will be filtered uli, pabalik doon sa loob ng hood, and then yung iba, lalabas naman. Okay, so nakikita mo yung kanyang airflow, di ba? May air na pumapasok, tapos bababa siya, dadaan siya sa filter, tapos babalik ulit doon sa hood, and then lalabas na siya sa environment, sa exhaust. So, the air is pulled inward and downward by a blower and pass up through the airflow plenum, where it passes through a HEPA filter before reaching the work surface. The percentage of the remaining air is HEPA filtered before reaching the environment. So, yung mga air na lalabas dyan sa biosafety cabinet na yan is filtered na and also safe. So, this is the biological safety cabinet class 2. Yung iba naman na nasa picture, so also another example of a biosafety cabinet. So, this is the class 1 biosafety cabinet. So, anong kanyang difference? Yung sa class 1 na yan, papasok lang yung air and then lalabas niya na. Okay? Yung class 2 kasi, papasok yung air, ibababa niya, babalik niya ulit doon sa loob ng hood, and then ilalabas niya na. Yun ang difference. Itong class 1 kasi, dire-diretso lang ang flow ng air. Pagpasok ng air, ilalabas niya agad. Okay? It is being exhausted directly in the HEPA filter. So, pataas ang flow ng air kapag class 1. Paano naman kapag class 3? Kapag class 3, this one yung letter C. So, makikita mo, wala siyang opening. Anong meron siya? Meron siya, butas lang, na pwede mong ipasok yung kamay mo doon. So, meron na siyang gloves. Tulad nga nang nandito kanina sa picture. Saan ba yung picture kanina? Wala ba akong picture? Wala ata akong picture nun. Anyway, kapag class 3, biosafety cabinet, so, meron siyang butas dito. Yung butas na yan, dyan mo pinapasok yung kamay mo. So, meron na siyang built-in gloves. Okay? So, pag pinasok mo na yung specimen dyan sa loob, so, meron naman yung door, pwede naman siyang buksan. Papasok mo yung specimen. However, when you open the specimen, dapat dito sa loob ng cabinet. And then, gagawin mo, papasok mo yung kamay mo dyan, since may gloves na yan sa loob, then, pwede mo nang i-open yung specimen. Kumbaga, ito yung mga specimen na hindi mo siya pwedeng basta-basta na lang i-open. So, kailangan pag in-open mo siya sa isang closed environment. So, yung air niya, papasok mula sa taas and then lalabas din pataas. Okay? Ganun lang siya. Kumukuha siya ng air sa taas and then papasok niya tapos lalabas na rin sa taas. Okay? That is the flow of the air kapag class 3 biosafety cabinet. Okay? So, that is the lesson.